Kaguya-sama Lovers War Episode 3. This show is definitely getting interesting. And yeah, I love this show already. I'm only 3 episodes in and I'm already loving it. And it sounds like the freaking narrator is into this as well. And the plot of this episode is Kaguya they end up a magazine got confiscated, and it has a test talking about when you had your first time, and 34% answered that it was when they were in high school. And they were very shocked to hear this, because usually when you think of your first time, you think of your first time with sex. And they think that's way too high, and Kaguya interjects and says, no, that's probably too low. And they asked her, is she among that 34%? And she says, yes. I'm like, wow, who did you do it with, girl? And the reason that I'm saying this is that I was assuming that they were talking about sex, because usually that's what you mean when you say your first time. And that's essentially what Shirogane and whatever the girl's name is, I can't remember. That's what they were thinking about. And as they were talking about it, I was thinking that Kaguya thought the same thing, because she was talking about them being virgins, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being a virgin. And he was agonizing over the fact that he was being left behind socially because he wasn't sexually active or had a girlfriend. And Kaguya shocked both of them, including me, which said, what's the big deal? I've done it with my newborn baby brother. And I'm like, what? And they were just equally shocked, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And they were like, well, she was like, what are you talking about? It's family. I guess you guys didn't have an affectionate family? And I'm like, and she was asking the girl, what about you and your dog? Don't you do that with them? And I'm like, oh my god, what is wrong with her? And I was like, wait a minute. She has to not be talking about sex, because there's no way that she would be talking about sex in this context. And he realized this and asked her, wait, what do you think we mean by first time? And she said, well, first kiss. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about. That makes sense considering what she said. Because you would think you would naturally kiss a little baby or kiss your dog. And I was thinking, what is wrong with this? Like, what is wrong with her family? And it turns out that she was very sheltered and only knew so far as kissing. Everything else beyond that point was a big fat mystery. And so the girl had to go and tell her, I'll handle this. And she went and told Kaguya, I guess give her the birds and the bees talk. And Kaguya was shocked and blushing, and thus she lost that round because of her lack of knowledge. Because obviously that is what the magazine meant, was first time having sex. Otherwise it would have said, when did you have your first kiss, if it was mentioning kissing. Because why else would you mention first time when it comes to a relationship? Second little plot is Kaguya wanted to see if Shirogane knew her as well as he claims to, because he claims he knows her very well, because they've been working together for the past 6 months. Well, they decided to do a 20 questions round, and instead of it being 20 questions, she cut it down to 10 questions. So he has to ask 10 yes or no questions and see if he can figure out what she's talking about. And as the questions are going on, he asks the question, is it something that you like? And she starts blushing and says yes. And so the natural question for him that he's thinking is she talking about me? And then he makes the next question very specific. Is this a living being? And she said yes. And he asked her, is this living thing have blonde hair, piercing eyes, all that stuff, essentially pertaining to him? And she said, yes. Now, he lost a question because he kind of got a little specific that wasn't a yes or no question, and that she couldn't answer it, so he wasted his question. And I can't remember if that was the last question he asked about, the looks. And he ended up realizing, is she talking about me? Because all the criteria fit. And as he's thinking about it, he's about to give his answer, and then he realizes something, and he's like, "Are you talking about whatever the girl's name was, her dog?" And she said yes. He got the answer right. So that was what he had to guess. And at first I was thinking, wait, what? And now I was thinking about the criteria. I was like, oh yeah. So yeah, he does. The round went to him because he does know her as well as he's claiming to, because he knew that was the answer. Even though he started overthinking it and thinking that she was talking about him, because he thought that might have been a roundabout way of confessing, which would have been a pretty clever way of doing it. Sadly, it's not to be, or else this would have been a short show. Are they ever going to confess? Seriously, what is so bad about being the first one to confess? Good lord. Stupid Mike. It started to fall forward. But yeah, what is so bad about being the first one to confess? Just because you've necessarily confessed first doesn't mean you're going to be the one losing in the end. Anyway, the next one is Kaguya wanting to walk to school, because she's usually driven to school. So she decides that I want to walk to school for a change. And so when the car had an issue, mechanically, because a stupid cat decided to prop itself in there, it won't come out, she decides, I'll walk to school. And she was doing it, and I was like, wait, does she know the route to school? Because she's been driven there the whole time. And as far as we know, she doesn't have a way of being able to figure out the way to school unless she asks them the way. And on the way there, she comes across a little girl who is just starting a new year at her school, where they don't walk in groups anymore to school, and that she's afraid to cross the crosswalks on her own because her friend that would usually walk with her is not there. So Kaguya walks her part of the way, and then they meet up with her friend, and Kaguya gives her some advice on maybe next time you guys could meet up at each other's house and walk to school that way together. And this ends up making her late to school almost. And she's actually annoyed because she thought that she was going to get to meet up with Shirogane on the way there. And she's like, I'm not going to get to do this anymore because she's ended up being late. And because if she's late, then it's going to cause trouble and they're not going to let her walk to school anymore. Turns out she did get to run into him on the way there, because he ended up pulling up on his bike on the crosswalk, and she was like, oh wait, you're going to be late too, and he's like, I'm never late. And so he has her get on the back part of his bike, even though that's obviously not safe, and he books it to school with her on his bike. And I'm like, that could have been interesting. So yeah, this is interesting show so far, and I wish that someone would confess already, because I would like to at least. I'm not really that interested in the aspects of getting the other to confess. I mean, it's interesting, just not as interesting as it could be if someone finally confessed and they started a relationship, because that's the whole point of a rom-com, is the romance, Okay, now the characters. Both of the characters are awesome still. Poor Kaguya is a bit naive when it comes to some things, including romance and relationships. Or not really romance. She's naive when it comes to the birds and the bees stuff. Definitely. And Shirogane and the other girl, they're more, I guess, knowledgeable, because I'm guessing they've had the usual talk when it comes to the birds and the bees. But I guess her parents decided they wanted to keep her sheltered because, they don't want her getting into any little trouble involving that sort of issue. So I guess this was their solution, which I don't think is a good idea. But yeah, it's interesting to see these guys' dynamic, and that I know that we're already on season 3 of this show, and they haven't confessed as far as I can tell. But I wish somebody would confess just so they could start dating and we could see that romance blossom. That's the whole point of a rom-com, is to see the romance portion. And we're never going to get to see it if they keep going with this little song and dance. And I know that's the whole point of the show, but still. Let me know if you guys think of the same way in the comments, because I would love to hear y'all's opinion on this. Do you guys want to see... I'd love to see the song and dance, and then lead up to the romance, and then they start building on the romance. That would be great. Heck, that could be what Season 3 could be about. One of them... They both could confess at the same exact time. Therefore, neither loses. And then they could start building on the romance in Season 3. That would be great. Anyway, let's see. Additional thoughts. Like I said before, this show is awesome. I love how the narrator is just as invested in this as everybody else is, because he sounds like he's got a stake in it, to be completely honest. And I really am eager to see what sort of shenanigans that these guys get up to.